Welcome to the Growing Further podcast, brought to you by the Green Man Group. I'm your host for today, David O'Mara. Through the Growing Further Innovation Awards, we in the Green Man Group are looking to identify and reward early stage businesses from across the world who are placing innovation and sustainability at the core of their strategies. This podcast is a series of conversations with successful entrepreneurs from a really broad range of businesses who have also placed innovation at the forefront of their businesses and see it as a key part of their success. Julian Hughes, thanks for coming in. Good to see you.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
We go back a long time. You call yourself a non-traditional farmer, and you also call yourself the MD of Hughes Farming. So how do you describe yourself to everyone?
I suppose when
how do you think about yourself, Julian?
That's a whole other topic for another day. But in terms of the background on non-traditional, we grow produce for retail. I suppose the main reason for the non-traditional is that it's not a traditional farming structure where we say there was farms handed down and things like that. So it's somewhat bucking the trend of, the argument that you need to own a farm to be involved in farming. Produce is a bit like farming on steroids in the sense that it's high risk. If you approach it in a very corporate and structured manner, there's a business there to be had. And we've had a couple of challenges. So
you think about farming as a business, not a lifestyle?
I hate that saying. I hate that thing, farming is a lifestyle. That's basically an excuse for I'm not making any money and I'm working every hour of the day. So I think that is one of the most disingenuous statements you'll have. I hate it. It has to be a business. I mean, there's very little point in doing it otherwise. A lot of people who will make that statement are people who've been left farms. Like, there's a huge amount of people that I come across who, in the traditional sense of Irish farming, have been left to farm and really don't want to farm.
They want to own land but not farm.
They're sitting there waiting for, potentially their own family situation to change, that they can sell land or do whatever they want to do. So it's a bit of a mess. But no, I hate that statement. I absolutely hate it. I mean, farming's a business. I mean, there was a time there where in farming in Ireland, be it with an acre of spring barley or something like that, you couldn't really lose money. I mean, you could make some money, or you could just not make money. Now you can lose quite a bit of money with cropping, with dairy, with beef, with any of it. Yeah. So farming nowadays is a different entity to what it was. I mean, it's big numbers you're dealing with. And I mean, often, a guy that I know, he went to buy a piece of land, and the farmer, the auctioneer said to him, "Oh, we've got a serious businessman bidding on this against you." And the guy had £1 million dry in his back pocket, ready to go, but yet he was considered to be the lesser businessman of the two of them. Right. So I mean, there's a perception there in farming that's a bit out of date. It's big numbers. These guys, the more successful farmers, and we're not in that category, to be fair, that's what I'm saying. But the guys who are doing it well are very, very tuned in. Okay. Well, let's talk about your path to farming. So we studied ag science for the Leaving Cert together, closer to 25 years ago than I'd care to admit. I suppose back in poor old Mr. Smith's class there, I certainly wasn't his best. You weren't easy on him. No. So I wanted to go to UCD, didn't get the points for UCD, spent too much time playing Tetris in school and ended up not getting the points. So I ended up down WIT. You're really aging yourself there with Tetris, yeah? Oh, I was very good at Tetris, and to be fair. Went down to WIT. Did my degree down there, was a so-so student, improved as it went on, enough to get a reasonable degree out of it. Went over to Harper Adams, did the Masters then in crop protection and agronomy, and did my agronomy certification over there. So really the background that I have is agronomic. So agronomy, just for the non-agricultural, is basically somebody who looks at crops and is able to tell people what you should apply to them, be it nutrition, be it disease control and things like that. Yeah. Quickly came back, was doing a bit of agronomy here, realised that it's very hard to make money out of it. Guy might have a couple of 100 acres of crop. He'll give you a field of 20 acres at the front of the block and ask you to write prescriptions for that, and he'll just roll that out over the whole block behind it. So, and it's a merchant-dominated game. And not pay you. And not pay, yeah. Yeah, look, they pay for the 20 acres, to be fair, but it wasn't a paying exercise. So I had ambitions to be a big tillage grower, so growing lots of wheat and barley and things like that. But, not owning a big area of land. So if you imagine many of your bigger tillage growers who are growing crops, they would own 500 acres and they might farm 1,000. Therefore, your land cost is, 50% of what it would be in my situation where I had to rent 1,000 acres. So immediately we were far more exposed to risk than guys who had a dilution of owned land versus rented. So increased our tillage area, grew a lot of crops. I did a Nuffield scholarship in 2010. Nuffield is like Freemasons for farmers, you could really call it, without all the weird costumes. So it's a peer-reviewed...
lot more Barber and Gillets and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, shuffle all over the place. But it's
a proper international network, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's a very impressive network. So I suppose the top line of it is that it's rural entrepreneur and innovators and thought leaders, we'll say.
Yeah.
How they gave me one, I don't know, but we got one anyway.
You faked it till you made it.
It was a poor year, I'd say, in intake. Got a Nuffield in 2010. I was... I'm going to say 23 at that stage, something like that. I just finished college. And
your maths are all over the place. You were 26.
26, was I?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
You're the same age as me.
All right, okay. 26. Traveled all over the world looking at farming.
So what countries did you go to?
I did 7 states in North America. Actually, my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, traveled with me. And it was brilliant in that sense because, we kind of did...
You had a chaperone.
Yeah, we did a hybrid affair, to be fair. So it was part holiday, part Nuffield. And it was brilliant for her because I suppose from her point of view, she saw what farming is like in other countries where it is very corporate, where it is very business-minded and structured. Her experience of farming in Ireland, would have been a crowd of moaners, basically, who spend all the time crying wolf, which probably still stands true today with a lot of farming sectors. But... did the Nuffield, that was really good. Did North America.
Sorry, North America where?
Did North America, then down into Peru, Bolivia, Argentina. Peru and Bolivia wouldn't be hotbeds of farming now, as you can imagine, but that was Val's part of the trip. So we did 12 weeks continuous. You're only required to do 6. So I mean, we got up and we just stayed going. Once we went going, we did a round the world ticket. So down into Peru, Bolivia, Argentina. Argentina was great. Met a man named Jim McCarthy down there who comes into the story later and something that we did together. He had put together a fund and raised quite a bit of money for buying farmland in Argentina. Okay. Irish guy? Irish guy, yeah, from Kildare, yeah. Jim is kind of a mercurial entrepreneur in Irish agriculture. Had a good time with Jim, then slipped on across into Australia. Travelled around Australia. Didn't do Western Australia, which I regret, to be fair. I'd love to go back to WA. Then out to New Zealand, Indonesia and back. And I did some travel then around Europe as well on top of it. So did a lot of travel. What Nuffield allows you to do is, let's say if you were in Nuffield and if I was visiting your area, I'd say to you, listen, Dave, what's the crack? I'm coming visiting. You would more than likely offer me a bed in the house, or, most of the farmers would have had outhouses on farms over there. The big farmers, these guys, the Irish Nuffields will be the smaller farming entities in the group. You would set me up with visits of best-in-class people in your area that lined up with my topic.
Right.
So my topic started off quite specific, it was innovation in crop production. It was mainly to do with crop tech in terms of GM and things like that.
You're a sponsor through Nuffield to go travel the world, research a certain topic and then present to your fellow Nuffield scholars.
Yeah, I mean, my sponsors were FBD and Farmers Channel. I'm very grateful for them. So we had a bursary there. Now I actually doubled the bursary. So whatever they contributed, actually I put that again with it. So I think it was €12,000 at the time. I think my Nuffield cost me about 25, and it was the best investment I've ever put in. So they sponsor us, and then you tap into the global network. It's a phenomenal thing to do. Like, it's incredible, because what you get is guys will open up the doors to you in areas that they wouldn't with local farmers or people. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's things that I can talk about with Nuffields that I know from Australia and England that I can't talk about with guys here because it's just a little bit close to home. And there was things that I got to see and do with them guys traveling around that you just wouldn't get an experience like it. So it was a unique situation that when you ring up and say, listen, I'm traveling as part of a Nuffield scholarship, like Monsanto gave us a full day. We picked up the original gene gun when we were in Kansas State University. We got to do things that, were I not a Nuffield, you just wouldn't get to do it. So Nuffield was great for me, but the topic quickly became less about innovation and technology and more about the people behind the businesses.
Right.
So you could say that people often say to me, what did I take away from my Nuffield? It probably made me see that these really impressive people running really impressive businesses, when they take off the shoes at the end of the day, they've got holes in their socks just the same way as I do. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they're very similar to us. They just have the bar a little bit higher.
Yeah.
And I suppose what it did for me is it probably encouraged me to be a little bit more punchy, take a little bit more risk, and push the bar up a little bit and be a little bit more ambitious. Probably clipped my wings a couple of times, that ambition. Now, to be fair, I've flown quite close to the sun a couple of times now, but
in relation to overstretching yourself?
Yeah, overstretching. Yeah. So, certainly, yeah. So, I mean, but yeah, look, I look back at my Nuffield and I think it was one of, if not the most important thing I've done in my career.
So you had, I suppose, a bit of experience. So you went to Harbour Adams, which is in the UK.
Yeah.
So you built a network there, I presume, of people you studied with.
Yeah.
And travel all over the world. But potentially a lot of Irish farmers don't have that opportunity. So what you talk about, the more professionally or the higher bar you saw in the States and whatever, are there people in Ireland at that stage kind of hitting those levels? Were you able to find them through Nuffield, or
I know that they're here.
Is Nuffield there to develop them?
Yeah, no, they're definitely here. Like, there is some really impressive operators in Irish farming, really impressive. Like, and nobody knows about these guys. The quality of business they're running and what they're doing. Because there's a brush that tars all farmers as being a little bit colloquial, a little bit quaint, and a little bit straw-hatted. That's fine for 80%. But there is a 20% there that are very impressive business people who run really, really tight businesses, who in a comparable sense to any corporate business would be. I mean, we have some of the strongest brands in the world. Dole Produce, which was recently bought by Total Produce, started by the McCann family in Dundalk, biggest fresh produce company in the world. Most Irish people don't realise that the biggest fresh produce company in the world originated in Dundalk. Not that long ago, to be fair. We've got some of the leading dairy brands in the world in the Kerry Group and in Glanbia. We live amongst it and we probably don't see it, but we actually have one of the more impressive cultural sectors in the world in terms of how we punch above our weight. But yeah, we take it for granted because it's right in front of us all the time.
So you come back from your travels buzzed up and, I suppose, ambitious and all of that, but without much land to do it with. So how did you get going?
See, the thing that happens most Nuffields, and I often say to you guys, just be careful when you come back from your Nuffields, that you come back with a bit of a buzz and a bit of a, I'm going to take on the world and I'm going to change it all in one shot. You got to be a little bit careful after something like that.
The old bull and the young bull on top of the hill.
It's a young bull on steroids now. It's a young bull that's been out of control. So probably one of the first things I did was when we were in Argentina, looking at thousands and thousands of acres of low-cost GM cropping that, contradictorily, we in the EU are pumping into pork animals, into different animals in Ireland. So, I mean, we will allow feedstock from them come into Ireland, but we're not allowed to produce GM. So we're on a massively unfair playing field, and that became very evident when I was in Argentina. So that was the point where I said, growing broad acre commodity cropping to try and compete with these guys is a complete waste of time.
Because the scale just isn't here.
Just can't do it. We cannot compete with them guys in terms of commodities. We can in terms of knowledge.
When you talk about commodities, what are you talking about?
Wheat, barley, soya. We can't grow soya, obviously, but wheat mainly. Wheat is a globally traded feedstuff, we'll say. Look, there's GM wheat, there's GM corn. So we've got GM corn coming into Ireland as a feedstuff, GM soya hulls, all of that sort of stuff. So, I mean, most of the jumper that you're wearing, probably an 80% chance that that's GM cotton. Okay. If you had pork in the last couple of days, probably an 80% chance that it's had GM feedstuffs into it. Most of our beef animals in Ireland are taking GM feedstuffs into them. So there's a massive contradiction there. We're importing GM feed, but we're not allowed to produce it in the EU. Okay.
So what niche have you carved out for yourself?
Well, I suppose I looked and I said to myself, well, we don't own a lot of land. So in terms of trying to play that commodity game with a 50% dilution of owned to leased land, don't have that. So I made the decision to dial into, to double down in terms of what we're doing on high value cropping. Okay. So if you don't have the land, well, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to have to grow higher revenues off lesser amounts of land. And that's what we did. We were already growing carrots. So when I was in college in WIT, the school bag on my back, and I called into Johnny O'Shea, Lord rest him, who was a mighty man, and sat down with him in the kitchen, and he said to me, I wanted to grow the world in all of spuds. He said, well, why don't you grow carrots? Started off at 3.5 acres of carrots and started building that business from there, supplying into O'Shea's. So that was where the produce business started. That was 2007, 2008 season.
Okay. Did you know anything about carrots?
Nothing, absolutely nothing. And how the man persevered with what he persevered with, I really am eternally grateful to him, because some of the nonsense and crap that we sent in trailers to them was, when I look back now, he he took a more virtuosic look on the whole thing than just a financial one, because
Taking the long-term view of it.
we have a very strong relationship with that business to this day, and we'll be very loyal to that. But very quickly realised that there's little point in us trying to grow broadacre cropping. So we doubled down on what we're doing in produce, started to increase that area, and we started to take on in 2014. We took on parsnip cropping, started supplying that to a few other customers, and then really started packing indirectly for retail. So the model in Ireland is a lot of people that say to you, I supply this retail or that retail. They don't. More often than that, they supply what's called a consolidator, an aggregator, who supplies the retailer. Now, there's a number of businesses who supply directly to retailers. It's a model, actually, the consolidator model actually works quite well, as does the direct model, depending on the time. So we were packing a lot of produce indirectly for retail, and that model worked very well for us as a business, grew that. And I suppose the business really aggressively started to scale 2014, which coincided with the time with myself and Jim out in Romania. So it just created some big questions there. So the produce business in Ireland is taking off like a scalded cat. Decisions to be made, and at the same time, in a real Nuffield type play, myself and Jim had fundraised on the eastern seaboard of the United States, and we put together a first round raise of 25 million with a second round of 25 coming behind it. We bought, let me get these numbers right now, 17,500 acres of farmland in northeast corner in Romania. Bought 2 farming businesses. I've driven more Romania than most Romanians will ever drive themselves. To be honest with you. We drove from left to right, top to bottom, and everything in between. And hey, it was really interesting. It was a really exciting time.
Let's take a step back. So where did this idea come from?
Why
Romania?
When I was in Argentina with Jim.
Jim is the mercurial entrepreneur.
Yeah, Jim had done a project similar to this in Argentina. And when I was in Argentina looking at what they were doing there, I was pretty blown away by it, to be honest. Right. Just in terms of the corporate approach to it, the structuring, the ability to scale the business.
Professionalism you hadn't seen in farming before.
Yeah, just phenomenal. It was very corporate. There was no emotion involved. It was a bottom line business, and very impressive what they were doing. And I suppose I would have stayed in contact with Jim on it because it was an area that I had an interest in.
Yeah.
Jim invited me to get involved on a couple of due diligence projects with him and things like that, which was interesting to do. And then we started to go on the road fundraising for a project which was led by Jim and supported by me. So I suppose I was the junior in that discussion, and Jim was very much the senior on it. Travelled all over parts of Russia, interesting experiences out in the back end of Kaliningrad, which is the westernmost ice-free seaport of Russia, small little outpost of Russia.
Looking for farmland.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, looking at projects. So you're brought out there by all the big auction houses, the Brown and the all the Savills, all these guys. They'd all have links into that. It's amazing. There's a lot of money out there for projects like this. There's a lot of projects out there to be done like this, but it's very easy to make a mess of it.
Right.
A lot of the fundamentals were there,
right,
but an agricultural understanding wasn't there.
Okay.
And I suppose, led by Jim, we would have been very focused on putting together a project that had strong fundamentals agriculturally, not just a land capital gain project. Prior to that, I suppose, actually a step that I've missed there is I was asked to get involved in a project in Africa. And I went out there with a group of prominent Dublin property developers, and I was the only ag on board. And it was an eye-opener, to say the least. I was young, had some interesting experiences, got lost out in the middle of 12,000 acres of savanna with fires burning towards us and standing lakes full of boa constrictors and all sorts of crazy stuff. crazy stuff.
That's definitely. How did you skip over that? That's a chapter for the book.
Yeah, no, that was a. I don't know how did I get it. There's a guy in Kilkenny there that was involved in a prominent developer. He was developing around Dublin, and he rang and said, listen, he knew I was doing a Nuffield, and said, listen, you're doing a bit of travelling. Would you come out and have a look at this? So we went out and we stood in a big block of land that they had identified, and the thing was so acidic you wouldn't grow anything in it.
Right.
But I'm standing there as the only ag. The boys are all charged up and they're going to do the divil and all in this, and I'm standing there saying, you'll do nothing here, like this will not happen, like this is just pure acid ground.
Good they had an agronomist on board anyway before they
a poorly qualified agronomist. But we went out sampling a piece of land one day, an 80,000 hectare plain.
Right.
And sitting on the back of a trailer and a tractor in front of us, and I'm there with the GPS saying, turn left, because we're grid sampling, so I got to get a representative sample of the whole grid. Saying to him, turn left, turn right. And next thing, we're about 3 hours into the day, so we're pretty much right in the middle of it now. Here's some screaming, turn around and look, tractor's disappeared. The boys drove straight down into a sinkhole.
Right.
So we sat out there in the savannah grass for 2 or 3 hours. It was a Sunday, and it was this is in Congo Brazzaville. So Congo River, you've got Congo Zaire over on your right hand side, Congo Brazzaville on the left. So the Belgians were over here, the French were over here.
Okay.
The French left quite a good taste in the mouth there, so it's quite a safe country. Across the river
Belgians,
now.
not so much.
Not so much, no. Not so much. So anyway, we're sitting out in the middle of this place, and they're all gone to church, and they're all doing what they're doing. So the boys are telling us, there's a bulldozer on its way out to collect us. No problem. So we thought, that's cool. So we all chilled out, have another drop of water, do whatever you do. Well, a couple of hours passed. Say to him, what's the story with the bulldozer, guys? Oh, he's in mass or church or whatever he's doing. There's a different guy coming. So we're saying, okay, all right, well, this kind of has to happen now. So then we see all the guys. So what they do over there is they actually burn fires 6 or 7 kilometres long, and they'll burn the savannah, and they'll go stand on the other side of it and wait for all the animals to come out, and they'll shoot them.
Okay.
We were in the middle of the savannah when they were doing this. So we see this fire, 3 or 4 kilometres away, coming at us quite fast. We were saying, is this guy coming for us? And then we realised that there's nobody coming for us. So all of the guys would have started chopping back the grass around us to create a kind of a fire bank between us and the fire. But I mean, there's no way we would have been under pressure now. So we made the decision that we're out of here. I had the GPS so we could walk our way back out. So anyway, we went back out along the track, and as we got closer to the fire, we had to make a decision that we had to backburn into the fire.
Okay.
And the safest way to do that was to stand in the lake up to our knees and backburn away from it.
None of which you studied in WIT or Harper Adams?
This wasn't on the curriculum. Lake is full of boa constrictors. All of the guides that are with us are, looking behind us to make sure no boa constrictors come up and grab our legs. Backburn the fire away, walk back out. I think we walked 12.5 kilometres with, amazingly actually, I brought 25 kilos of soil samples on my back. Why I didn't leave them behind, I don't know.
Acidic soil samples.
Acidic soil samples, yeah. Got out and got home in one piece.
You didn't get involved in land in Africa, but you did in Romania.
In Romania, yeah. The Romanian project, that's still going to this day, to be fair. I suppose that project in Romania, I spent a lot of time out there. I spent probably 2 years on and off, and spent a year where we were intensively out there.
Why did you settle in Romania?
Under EU control. A lot of money being pumped into that area in terms of EU supports. Good quality land. And they would say that, and our experience to support this, that the Romanians are a Latin island in the Slavic Sea, is what somebody from the embassy explained to us out there. Quite a placid people. So our experience of Romanians in this country is not what I would have experienced out there. They are a smashing country, really, and some of the guys on the ground out there are top-class operators. What they can do in terms of machine maintenance with limited poor equipment is incredible. Some real good guys and real salt-of-the-earth people in the farm world out there. So good people available, good land, low base price for land to get into it. So yeah, it was a really interesting project, to be fair, and I look back on it with very fond memories. But in 2014, I had a decision to make. The business here, in terms of what we were doing back into retail, was really starting to take off. It was accelerating like a horse that was getting out of control. And I kind of had a decision to make. I wasn't going to be able to keep both balls up in the air. So I resigned from the project in Romania and came back and focused all my efforts on the business in Ireland. I remember not long after I resigned from it, I was sitting on top of an elevator on poor quality equipment trying to get crop processed, washed and out, and I was sitting there pulling a stone out of an elevator, covered in muck now, miserable, cold, crap conditions. I remember sitting there thinking to myself, I really hope you've made the right decision here. But no, I've always enjoyed the project in Ireland, what we've done there.
You talk a lot about customers. So who are your customers? Are you talking about the big retailers? Are you talking about direct
I mean, we indirectly or directly deal with all 5 of the retailers.
And what's that? The perception is, grocery retail is viciously competitive between them, and they're tough and they're suppliers. So how do you find that relationship?
Well, it is but no different to dairy, no different to anything else. I mean, where you have a direct relationship, it's useful in terms of you're part of the category growth story. So a buyer will expect you to actually influence the category growth. And what I mean by that is they'll expect you to innovate on new products. And you say to yourself, a carrot's a carrot. It is, but you can manipulate the weights, you can manipulate the packaging formats, there's different things you can manipulate to give them a better price point. They get a better price point, they sell more, but you sell more, but everybody wins together. There's a general perception out there that retailers control, the flow of food in Ireland. They actually don't, to be fair.
What do you mean by the flow of food?
Well, I mean, we work collaboratively with all of our customers, be it directly or indirectly. But there's a perception there that, that's the dynamic that controls what's on the shop shelf. It's actually not. Consumers have total control of that. And I sit at lots of dinner parties and stuff like that, and people tell me, oh, you should do this, you should do that. And I mean, it's all well and good, but it's a total contradiction what they're saying to me, because they tell me what I should do, but then they go into the shop and they spend on the exact opposite what they're telling me to do. Consumer buying trends absolutely drive production in Ireland, nothing else. And I mean, the consumer needs to take ownership of that. And I would have a bit of a frustration that there's a bit of a disconnect for the consumer, that the consumer thinks that it's not our problem, it's not part of our discussion. It actually is. So if the consumer doesn't go into a retailer and say, I really want to buy Irish carrots with a provenance story that I can put my finger on, well then the retailer says, well, they keep buying these Israeli carrots, so we'll just stock more Israeli carrots. If they keep buying the Irish carrots, the retailer would say, it's no problem, we'll just stock more Irish.
And how does the consumer know that it's an Irish carrot? Your face isn't on a carrot.
Oh, stop being lazy. Pick up the pack. It's on it. Yeah. It says it on it. Just people choose to ignore it. Yeah. I mean, it says Origin Ireland. There's a big Borbia label on the Irish stuff. It says Israel on the Israeli stuff, or the Egyptian stuff, or whatever it is. So I think people conveniently tend to have an inability to read a label when it suits them to. Yeah. I mean, the €2 chicken. I mean, fundamentally, how can you buy a chicken for €2? Yeah. You can't. But the consumers will go out and buy it.
And do you think consumer habits are changing? Are they turning their back a little bit on that? Or
I don't know that. I mean, I don't know, do we tell our story very well in this country? I mean, Irish fresh produce, I would think, is probably the best quality in the world. And I'm not just saying that because I'm in it. I've travelled all over the world. I've walked through fresh produce pack houses all over the world.
We met at Fruit Logistica last year, which was
absolutely
mind-blowing for me how big that. You might tell people what Fruit Logistica is.
And I failed to get the Green Man credit card out of you for a couple of pints, but maybe next year. Fruit Logistica is like what is it? It's the biggest fresh produce trading event in the world. So you'll have the Mexicans there, you'll have the Irish there, you'll have everyone there. So everyone comes to trade, everyone comes to network, everyone comes to sell their produce.
It's like the National Ploughing Championships for
on a global
scale
for produce. Yeah, so fruit and vegetables essentially. But I mean, you walk through pack houses all over the world. The water quality that they are treating their produce with, so washing the product with, pretty questionable at times. Right. The smell in some of the pack houses, pretty questionable. I mean, I would walk into pretty much any pack house in Ireland on carrots, and I'd pick a carrot up off the wash line and eat it. I wouldn't do that in most of the pack houses that I've been in abroad. Right. So I don't think the consumer actually realises just how high a quality we're held to in this country and what we produce to. So,
is that because of our place in the EU, or you think it's an Irish specific thing?
I think it's a bit of both. And I think it's because we're not massive scale. So, I mean, you're talking about factories that would be producing 300 tonnes a day of carrots. A reasonably sized Irish producer would do 150 tonnes a week. So, I mean, the scale volumes that are going through these plants is totally different. So, we have daily checks, traceabilities, and accountability in terms of the product and the ability for product recalls and things like that we would be catching quicker than they would, because the volume is smaller in terms of what we're doing. So, if there was an issue, you're talking about a low level of volume that you could potentially have an issue with. If you have an issue with some of the bigger continental European suppliers, it's a big issue. I mean, all of the E. coli issues, all of these things, it's all coming in from Europe. There's very good producers out there, but I just think as a producer nation, I don't think any of them come with an ass's roar of what we do here. We don't tell that story very well. And that's something that
the dairy industry probably does that, tell that story very well, but maybe not so much for fresh produce.
It's starting to tell it better, to be fair to them. So I see the adverts there on the environmental dairy group. I'm not sure what the name of it is. I mean, there is a cohort of dairy farmers now that are turning around saying, hey, we're actually going to take a different view on how we produce here. And I think them guys need to be applauded for that in terms of what they're doing environmentally, in terms of animal care and things like that. And I think the consumer, again, should take a leap of faith in that and say, well, we're going to demand that we want this product that's a high welfare, low environmental footprint dairy product. Similarly, taking...
Because we're not going to do that mass production thing well, but we'll do the quality end of the market.
And in produce terms, we can't do the mass production the same way. Like, we've got a higher cost base here. It's as simple as that. Our minimum wage is much higher than people we're competing against. So, I mean, Spanish produce coming out of Murcia down in Spain. I don't know if you've ever flown over, is it Alicante you fly into down there?
Yeah.
You look down into the Murcia region, it's just a sea of plastic. That's all it is. There will be some very questionable environmental situations down there in terms of how they dispose of plastic, in terms of employee welfare and things like that. But that's where most of our salads come out of.
Yeah.
People are happy enough just to play along with it because it's cheap.
Yeah.
We can grow all of that in Ireland. We're just not willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it comes back to it. Like,
And you're not seeing that change. You're not seeing that trend change.
There's some very good innovative companies here, and some of the retailers, to be fair, have taken on initiatives where they've taken products that have been mass imported products and turned around and said, all right, well, we're gonna set up with this grower here, we're gonna back him. And I think the retailers are much better on that, and the consolidators, the retailers, everybody, they're much more willing to do that than people give them credit for. But again, the consumer has to play their part. When the retailer and the grower and the consolidator and we'll say the supply chain comes together to offset imported product, it's up to the consumer then to do their bit and actually support it by buying it. If the supply chain goes to the bother of trying to produce this product and the consumer says, I'm still going to buy this cheap imported crap, well, it just tells the supply chain, we actually don't want that product. So that's why this production will stop on it.
So we've had 2.5 years now of inflation being an obsession for everyone.
Pretty exciting.
It's never been dull, but I mean, it's really interesting in your business because you get the pressures of your inputs, the cost of machinery, fuel, whatever, and then but also people are more conscious of what they're spending on their food, and food inflation is going up for the supermarkets. So how have you found that journey over the last few years? It's
been horrific. It's been absolutely horrific. Yeah, the last 3 to 4 years have been absolutely horrific. I mean, I've done the numbers there in terms of what inflation has taken out of our business, and it's off the Richter scale. We don't want to be constantly having to go back to the market trying to readjust prices. Well, I mean, government has to play their part on it as well. We had a 12.5% correction on minimum wage that, sort of came out of the blue a little bit halfway through last year. That's a substantial impact on produce business in this country, and it's driving the cost of food. So I mean, we have politicians who are coming out and they're trying to bang the drum saying, we're going to put manners on the retailers and drive the cost of food down. They're being a bit disingenuous because their buddies on the other hall are driving the cost of food up. So I mean, the contradictions that are coming at political level in terms of that are very frustrating. They're making us work in a situation where we are very high cost producers, while at the same time they're banging the drum saying that they want low cost food. It doesn't really work that way. EU subsidies were brought in back in the 80s by, to keep the cost of food down. EU subsidies haven't inflated at the same rate the costs have inflated. So as a percentage, their impact is now quite minimal.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of growers now in Ireland, or a lot of bigger dairy producers now who are choosing to go out of the subsidy loop and are no longer engaged in the Department of Agriculture and just deal with local council. So they don't get any EU aid.
Really, yeah.
In terms of produce, we've been heavily impacted. We had, I don't know the exact figures, but we have 300 growers in the early 2000s. I'd say we're down to 70 commercial growers in this country at the moment.
Wow.
And it's fallen quite quickly. So I mean, on one hand, we have a situation where our politicians are making it somewhat untenable for us to produce, and on the other hand, they're saying we really need a sector.
Yeah.
So it's been a challenge, to be fair, and it's a challenge for everybody. It's a challenge for people who are buying produce and selling it on to retailers, challenge for us as producers, challenges for retailers. And I mean, you got to remember, like, they all have to go together. Price of carrots is €1.25 in the supermarket. If it went to €1.49, would the consumer notice the difference? No, but all of the retailers need to do it at the same time, or else one of them is going to be out.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge to get prices up, and I suppose what happened was, if you imagine two sides of a rugby ball, costs went through the roof quickly and somewhat plateaued, and revenues didn't go through the roof, follow it, and now are coming to meet it. Haven't got there yet, but certainly are getting there. But that gap in between, that rugby ball size gap in between, we'll never get back. And you're not going to complain about it.
Prices shoot up, they don't shoot down.
No, and that's it. And I suppose there was a hope there that the initial price spike was just a price spike in terms of costs and that it would come back. It never came back. Diesel this morning, €75. When this started, it was €25. Minimum wage, not long ago, was €8.65. It's €12.70, I think it is today. Do you know what I mean? That's a substantial increase. You're talking about close on a 50% increase on one of our biggest costs.
So you've been caught in this period where your costs have shot up, your reward for the work you're doing or the product you're producing is coming up, but very, very slowly. So you're getting squeezed in that in between.
And it's nobody's fault, but it certainly isn't helpful when politicians come out and start banging the drum saying that they want to drive down the cost of food, while at the same time their buddies on the other side of the hall are saying that we want to drive up the cost of inputs for these guys.
So I'm just thinking now, fast forward a few months and the general election is on and there's some poor unsuspecting fella knocks on your door, gets an absolute
there's one politician in particular. He's not in my area, but if he did knock on the door, I certainly wouldn't be afraid to tell him what I thought of his commentary in the last while in terms of retail and things like that. He should maybe keep his nose out of it.
We started this by talking about you being a non-traditional farmer. What do you do at a farming level that's different? Like, what investments have you made? What equipment do you have? What do you do that's different from someone growing maybe carrots, parsnips on a smaller scale? Where are you getting that value at?
I suppose the two topics now are linked to what we just talked about. You know, the last 4 years have meant that the sustainability discussion in the produce sector has been very questionable. So, there's not much innovation going on in produce in this country in the last 4 years because the margins haven't been sufficient for it. You get into a situation where you're focused on just keeping the business alive during a high input inflation period. In terms of what do we do as a business, I mean, a huge amount of monitoring, huge amount of management. A business like ours is all detail, and that can be a real challenge. One of the hardest parts is to find staff and to find people who understand. I mean, we would produce revenues of somewhere between 20 and 25,000 euros an acre. A standard tillage farm would produce, I don't know, what are we saying, 200 quid a tonne, maybe 800 or 900 quid an acre, maybe 1,000 on a very strong year, might go down as low as 500 in a poor year.
You're doing 20
to 25,000.
Wow. What's having the impact? Technology, or what's the difference? It's just
attention to detail. Attention to detail. So produce is a bit like Formula One car racing. If you give it exactly what it wants when it needs it, plant it at the right densities, do everything exactly right, it will give you exactly what you want. But if you ignore one of them steps, it'll go to kilter on you. You'll get out of size crop. You'll get inconsistent scheduling of the product coming in and things like that. So it's as I said, produce is like farming on steroids. If you're not at match pace every day, you'll have a problem for sure.
Lots of stuff you can't control. The weather being the big one. How does that impact you?
We can control it a bit.
I knew you were good. I didn't know you were that good.
Call me JC. We can control it to an extent. We would irrigate. All of our cropping area would be irrigatable.
Okay.
That's the first thing. So if we get a drought, we need to be able to pump water. It's a challenge. People probably don't fully understand irrigation. We take the water out of the river, we pump it up onto the crop, it goes down into the ground and it comes back out. The water use efficiency on the crop is actually very low. So pretty much all of the water that we pump actually goes back down into the water table.
Okay.
So, and generally we're farming beside rivers, so it essentially returns to the river. It's like a circle. People don't understand that, and they get the yips a little bit about irrigation. In terms of frost,
you constantly have to test that river water for
huge amount. Yeah. So we would have incredibly high quality assurance standards. So in terms of water tests and in terms of rodent proofing, in terms of all them things, would be held to a huge standard. We're open for unannounced auditing 12 months of the year. We're in, I'm going to say 5 different schemes: Global Gap, Borbia, Shas, Borbia Ornamental, Organic. What else have we got? There's another couple there. SEDEX in terms of ethical.
Is that organic category growing?
We're actually not organic certified at the moment, in the sense that we dropped it because we're no longer packing organic produce. We were packing some organic produce. Is it growing? I don't think so. I think the conventional production is actually, organic is staying on one track. And I think conventional is coming closer and closer to it. So in terms of the chemical arsenal that we would have to use now, it's dramatically reduced in terms of what it was. So we're becoming more organic year on year. So every year now we're having more instances where we're hand weeding crops, sending out teams of men instead of using herbicides, because the herbicides that we have now, they're very poor in terms of selectivity. So they're quite hard on the crop.
Right.
So you say to yourself, well, it's quite an expensive chemical. It's going to touch up the crop and slow it down. It's actually cheaper to send in a gang of men and give them a per acre rate to actually hand weed the crop. We use robotic hoeing, so we've got a hoe that goes in the front of the tractor, and it's got an eye. It's basically able to differentiate the crop from the weeds.
Okay.
And it's got hydraulic arms, so when it's going down on the crop, it moves the hoe over and back, and it drags legs in between the crop there, and it hoes out on the weeds. So all of them sort of things, which would be integrated pest and weed management techniques, it's becoming more and more important because the chemical side of it is becoming less significant. So what am I really saying? We're becoming more organic.
Okay.
Organic isn't moving to us.
Okay,
we're moving to
that's
them.
interesting. And you talked about the automatic hoeing and stuff. What other kind of machinery are you using now, or you will be using shortly, that wasn't there 5, 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, optical grading is probably the big one. That's where we're not there, but that's where we need to be. And if
optical grading, what size is that when you're in the sorting shed? Or
yeah, so once the carrots are washed and once they're nice and orange, you've got big ones, little ones, broken ones, damaged ones, all that. Optical graders are able to sort all that crop for you. So take away all the human intervention. So you can say to it, I want all my carrots that are between 200 and 250 mil in length that are grade 1 category, and you specify all that. It'll put them down a certain lane for you. You say to yourself, I want all carrots that are over 35 mil and have a length of 100 mil plus, which you can process for battens. I want all them to go down a different lane. Okay. So your crop recovery and things like that. So optical grading is probably the big one. The last 3 to 4 years has slowed down a lot of these projects. We'd be much further down the line. Like we had integrated a telemetry system across that would steer the tractors and the implements behind it automatically. We've actually removed that now because the service in Ireland, I don't think, are very well placed to support that if you get an issue. So we found that when it was working, it was super. But if we had an issue, the whole system stopped. You've got 8 tractors sitting in a field, sat behind one during planting time when you're under weather constraints, waiting for a guy to come fix it. It's not ideal. So what benefit we're getting out of it, we were losing in terms of downtime. So I would think that if a bit of viability and a bit of margin comes back into the sector, we'd probably be able to invest a bit more in technology. It just isn't there today.
And do you see a day in the short to medium term where you'll get outside of carrots and parsnips? Are you looking at other crops to grow? Or
we did a bit of, what would you call it? Horizontal category growth, if I was to use some waffly language for it. And
that's your Nuffield
that's a real Nuffield one.
Kicking in.
We were growing different cropping and things like that. We've actually gone the other way now where we've narrowed down our cropping portfolio because just with it being as challenging as it has been the last 3 to 4 years, you need to drill into what you can do really well and make money off it, and not until you really get that pumping can you actually carry some inefficiency on lesser margin lines. So we did. We used to grow, probably half, if not more, of Ireland's pumpkins. The risk was too high. Made loads of money one year. Thought it was great. Lost an enormous amount of money the next year. If I did a 7-year P&L on pumpkins, I'd say we're at break even on it.
What's specific about with just the wrong conditions? Or
pumpkins are a strange one. They're like sheep. They just spend their life wanting to die. Right? So and when you think they're going to die, they do the opposite. And the even more challenging part is that when you've got a really good pumpkin crop, there's no labour involved because you don't have to pick them up because you know they're all perfect. You just sample.
Okay.
So we'd have potentially...
You can see them there in front of you. You don't have to dig them out of the ground.
When we were at our best, we'd have 35,000 fruit going down the processing line in a day. You would sample them and you'd say, there's just no issues here. We don't need to sample them, and you just pump them across the line. So when the crop is good and the yield is good, actually your labour cost is dramatically low.
Yeah.
But then when you get a year where they're poor and they're getting internal spotting and things like this and all sorts of issues, not only do you have high wastage, not only do you have high returns, you also then have a situation where you have huge labour because you got to pick up every fruit and check it.
Okay.
So pumpkins are a double dip crop. They double dip you positively and they double dip you negatively. And what happens then on top of that is that if you have a really good year this year, so you get the double dip positive, right? The market will then downgrade the price for next year.
Right.
So you potentially have a triple negative
dip. You've oversupplied the market with good quality projects.
Exactly. So next year you have a poor price, high labour cost and low yield.
Right.
So it's a devil in that. It spikes and troughs something ferocious relative to other crops.
How do you deal with stress? Do you deal with stress?
No, I don't really.
Should I ask that question to your lovely wife Val?
Tear the skin of my fingers is one of the ways you'll know when I'm really at peak stress. Like, I enjoy what I do.
Do you find it stressful, I suppose, is the question?
I do at times, yeah, I do at times, but you got to keep perspective on it as well. So, like, it can be high risk at times, but there's nobody going to take your kids off you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at least that's a starting point
Yeah.
to work from.
Kids might run away from you, but
Yeah, well, yeah, I hope not. But I've gone through some really challenging periods of the business. We've gone through some really challenging cash flow periods of the business. Like, you got to remember that I started the business from a dot, so most of the people I compete against have a balance sheet that's 50 years mature, some 100 years mature. Our balance sheet is 10 years mature.
you don't have a big rainy day fund.
Not at all, no. So we're constantly, we've got to, as I say to people, we've got to put the ball between the posts every day. Some of our competitors, they would have assets that they could lean back on. They would have land that's very valuable in valuable parts of the country. We don't have that. So, no, it's been a challenge to build a business. Yeah, it's been a real challenge. You want to have a bit of dog in you to do it, to be fair. And I'm not sure. Like, as I said to a guy one day, he said to me, "Jesus, Julian," says, you always seem to be under pressure." I said to him, "Well, I'm under pressure because I don't want my kids to have to do what I do. I want my kids to be like the guy who I was talking to. I said, I want them to be like you. I want them to grow up in a situation where they have a bit of asset value behind them that they can kick on." So, in terms of that generational thing where you say the first generation, puts their shoulder into it, second generation polishes and really makes it work, and the third generation puts it against the wall. I'd say I'm the first in that line.
Right.
Hopefully, if any of my kids want to get involved, and I don't mind if they don't, to be honest, that'll be something for them. I wouldn't force them into it. You would hope that they would have the tools to be the second part of that discussion, and what their kids would do after that, I won't be here to see it. So it doesn't bother me. But no, it can be tough going. Yeah, it can be really tough going. The last 3 to 4 years have been very challenging. I mean, you set a budget for the year, you set a forecast, you say this is what we expect to do, and then halfway through the year you realise we're miles out on it because we've had dramatic cost inflations all around us. And that's been a real challenge. Just this moving goalpost, trying to hit it for the last 3 to 4 years it's been horrific.
And what's the plan for the next few years? Where that gap you talked about that inflation brought about is closing, but you thinking about growth? You think about growth in Ireland or abroad or what?
No, we as a business knew that in the short term it was going to be really challenging. We knew that these couple of years, and we know that this year is going to be challenging as well because we're only trying to climb our way out of it. Is the market rebalancing slowly? We would take a medium-term view on it. We're a young business. I was only 40 last Friday.
Here's the birthday cake.
Yeah, there it is. I have a Revolut count for any birthday presents. We would take a medium-term view on it. We're quite a young business. The senior management team is, some of the key people are sub 40, some are just over 40. So we would look at it very positively in the medium to long term. Short term is still challenging. Yeah. Certainly is. And I suppose, as I often say to the lads, you just keep your head about you at the moment and just keep moving forward. I think if you can stand still at the moment, it's probably a result because so many around us are really, really under pressure in all businesses, not just our sector. So, yeah, we would be looking to, we've plans to grow the business for sure, especially in the next 12 months. We have a couple of projects on there to really push the business on.
And when you just turn 50 and when you turn 60, will more farmers be talking about in terms of business, or will they still be, will there be a big shift in the next 10 years?
I think all farmers are talking about business today. I just think they don't verbalise it very well. I think that there's a bit of an embarrassment in farm. There's an embarrassment in Ireland on being prepared and being like, I train rugby teams there, and there's this bravado nonsense of people being afraid to turn up with a training plan. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's pure nonsense. And I think there's a bit of a thing with farming as well, that you don't want to be seen to be the nerd talking about, financial planning and things like that. I think that's changing.
As in what they're... in rugby, talent will get you through. Talent is more valued over effort, kind of thing.
Grip it and rip it sort of mentality. Yeah. So I think that farming now, you have no choice but to be very commercial. I think the potential to lose money is so high now. I think that farming has been in recession for the last couple of years. I think that dairy, to be fair, had a good year, which probably didn't do them any favours now. In hindsight, it probably created a bit of a bubble that has created their own cost inflation that they really are now not enjoying. So, I mean, I look around farming at the moment and there's no real sector profiting. There's no real sector doing well. So, I mean, I go back to the consumer. Does the consumer want Irish produce, be it beef, be it dairy, be it carrots, be it potatoes? I would always shift back to that one. I mean, I'm on IFA horticulture committees and things like that, and I'd be fundamentally opposed to some of the ways we go about protesting against our own customers as a group. I think it's the wrong approach, and I think it's a bit lazy on us as farmers to protest against our customers. I think really the focus should be on educating the consumers, and I think we do that very poorly. To back to your original question, do I think that farming is going to become more commercial and business minded? It is, and it is today. Some of your big dairy operators are some of the sharpest guys around. They'd put it up to anyone you're going to put in a room with them. But definitely the top 30% of producers out there in any sector now are highly efficient business people who are really dialed in. So that change has already happened. And the use of all of the tools that guys would use in corporate business in central Dublin or in London or wherever like that, farmers are using them. That's happening now, just not really been heard about as all.
And finally, for someone who's been listening to this, watching in, and you've given them all they're thinking about now is get a nice carrot or parsnip, where can they get Hughes Farming produce?
Well, we've actually just launched a product with Tesco there, which is the 750 gram Hughes Farming bag, which even has my picture on the back of it.
Did you shave for the picture? Not for the podcast,
yeah? The picture's about 15 years old now, to be fair, so don't tell anyone that.
Especially selected.
Exactly, but so you can buy Hughes Farming brand product in Tesco. And then we supply indirectly with a number of other people as well. But in terms of our own Hughes Farming brand, it's with Tesco, and we do a chunk of the Tesco brand as well. So the little HF on the bag, that's our Hughes Farming.
And do you still do a few pumpkins for a bit of a pumpkin patch?
The pumpkin patch is an interesting one, yeah. So we don't really do any retail pumpkins anymore. We do a small bit actually under Hughes Farming brand again with Tesco. But what we do on pumpkins now is predominantly the pumpkin patch, which if you had said to me a couple of years ago, I would have said you're mad, but it's a nice little business, works really well for us. There's a story to tell behind it. We grow them all ourselves. It's on the farm. We've a bit of work to do to make it a little less industrial feeling and make it a bit more farmy feeling. And hey, there's a runway for that project if I manage to get the noise out with the inflation discussion on the main farming business. There's a couple of projects to be done.
So this October you can spin down to Kells, County Kilkenny, get a nice hot chocolate and a coffee and go pick a pumpkin.
Yeah. Bring your credit card or cash and have into it. Yeah, there's nothing we won't sell you if you come down.
Julian, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for coming.
Man, thanks, Dave.
I just want to thank you for tuning in today and really hope that you enjoy that conversation as much as I did. To find out more information, please check out growingfurther.io or follow Growing Further on LinkedIn.